Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jess McClure. I'm with the National Grain and Feed Association. I see we're about ready to get started here. We are hosting this webinar with the Missouri Agribusiness Association and want to thank them very much for what they've done to help put this event together. And so I'm here with Aaron Gelb, who's with the Conmace Carey, and it's a law firm that NGFA has worked with throughout the years on a wide range of OSHA-related issues. And I do know that Conmace Carey has represented many of our members. When it comes to safety, NGFA is very focused on this particular topic. And in fact, we have if you have not been to our webpage, you can go to ngfa.org/safety, and we have a wide range of materials on there that will address a lot of the topics that Aaron has planned here today. In addition, in the great state of Missouri, we offered to do we provided a tour to the current Assistant Secretary of OSHA, Doug Parker. We offered to provide him a tour of his first visit he ever had to a grain handling facility. Was at a grain elevator there just outside of Kansas City. So unfortunately, he's not going to be with us for the next couple months. So I think we'll have to work on with the new administration, new Secretary of Labor. There'll be a new OSHA administrator, but that's definitely something we'll be working on within the coming months. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron here in his presentation that's going to be focusing on the new emphasis program that'll be that is actually it started in Missouri as far as the outreach goes, but the actual enforcement is going to start January 1. And in addition, we also have on the webinar here today, we have representatives from can be participating on the webinar to answer any questions and provide just a real quick update on the outreach within the emphasis program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Aaron, and look forward to hearing.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. Actually started my career in St. Louis about 30 years ago, and being located in Illinois now, a significant portion of my practice is dedicated to working with grain handling companies here in Illinois and across the Midwest. The Peoria area office, I think, is probably the most active with respect to grain handling inspections. So we worked on quite a few. I am an OSHA management side OSHA lawyer, meaning I work with employers across all different industries across the country. My firm is a OSHA focused boutique. We've got about 25 OSHA lawyers spread out across the country. There has been a grain handling emphasis program here in Illinois for many years. So I'm very familiar both with incident inspections as well as emphasis program inspections. And since this is there has been, as some or all of you may know, there has been an emphasis programs in neighboring states, in Kansas, Nebraska, again, and as well as Illinois. So Missouri is kind of, I guess, in a way, kind of flown under the radar in that respect. So now that there is a regional emphasis program based out of OSHA's Kansas City region that will cover Missouri effective in the beginning of the year, as Jess said, we thought it would be helpful to provide a number of updates, kind of overview of the process, just to give you all a sense. And my bio's here if anyone wants to scan the QR code and get a link to it, or you just go to our website. I don't try not to get involved in too deep into bios. I know that's not why you all logged on. And I'm gonna turn my camera off in a minute, just because I think it's more important to focus on the slides. I always enjoy presenting in person, and I'm looking forward to doing that in January. We're gonna have, as Jess said, we're gonna have a really good program with a number of speakers, including folks from other grain handling companies who can share their experiences, tips, and suggestions. But for today's purposes, we wanted to start off again with an overview of what an emphasis program it is, why it's important to understand, how they work, how you can prepare for them. Then we're going to get into kind of key perspectives that we have, having defended these inspections having prepared clients for these inspections. As Jess said, we've got a representative from OSHA, one of their compliance assistant specialists. She's going to go kind of in the middle of the program, share the agency's perspective, which is obviously an important one. And we'll end with kind of a lessons learned experiences that I've garnered over the years, defending and managing these types of inspections. I like to spend a lot of time kind of talking about some of the things that I've seen, sort of the things that my clients will say, well, we didn't think that would be an issue. We never imagined something like that could happen here, and share some the observations and lessons learned that we've had over the years, in hopes that you all can avoid similar issues. So with that, I'll jump right in. We'll begin by explaining emphasis programs, again, what they mean, why they're important. And I think we're a small enough group. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Hold it to the end. I think you could, I don't know if we have the capability to unmute yourselves, but if you do, I'm happy to field questions in the middle. If you think you're not going to remember it, I think that folks learn well or better from when other people share examples. If you're uncomfortable talking about your own company, I always like to say, just talk about your friend's company. It might just happen to be similar to yours, but you can talk about it as if it's your friend's company or organization, if that's a little bit easier. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of emphasis programs, just a quick recap of the different types of inspections that OSHA conducts. Most common, I think, that if you've been inspected in the past, usually is as a result of a serious incident that is self-reported, such as an amputation or inpatient hospitalization, or God forbid, a fatality. Certainly, all fatalities that are incident related are going to be inspected by the agency. So the majority of amputations are inspected, and usually about 50-50 as to whether an inpatient hospitalization is inspected. OSHA will also sometimes inspect complaints, employee complaints, either by current employees, past employees. Sometimes that can be determined by the subject matter of the complaint, whether it implicates an emphasis program or other issues. A little bit harder to predict when somebody or when the agency will inspect as a result of a complaint. There are also follow-up inspections. So if you've been inspected and or cited in the past, but certainly if you've been cited, there's a chance that OSHA is going to come back at some point, 6 months, a year, 2 years from when that inspection was completed. You submitted your abatement certification, and then they come back to make sure that the things that you put in that certification are still in place, that the hazards that you addressed either during or after the inspections remain addressed and are not present in your workplace. There is also, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, there is a subset of inspections, pretty infrequent, which are referred to as imminent danger, and that is when there is a particularly significant hazard or potential hazard present in the workplace. It's probably most common if you think about when there's a trench on the side of the road, or individuals working on top of a steep slope roof without fall protection. Those are the instances where the compliance officer, if they see it, they may simply pull over, ask people or order people out of the trench or off the roof. But I have dealt with imminent danger allegations in the context of a grain handling inspection. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the last type, which is what we're talking about today, are programmed inspections. And so these are essentially national, regional, or local in scope. And they are based on and developed by OSHA. And I think the particularly important thing to understand and remember is that the agency gets a lot of data, right, through electronic uploading of 300 logs, 300A summaries, et cetera. And that data, and also there's data kept and maintained at local and regional levels. That data is analyzed, crunched, reviewed, and the agency then develops these programs specifically to target hazards that may be present in a region, in a particular area, or at the national level. And so if you look at just, this is some brief statistics. Last year, or last fiscal year, OSHA completed just over 34,000 inspections, and 15,000 of those, or a little bit closer to 16,000. So almost half are programmed inspections. And then you can see the subset. There were a number of different other. There
But if I do that, I still don't have anything. It says I'm talking.
I think someone. Sorry, I thought that was a question. Why do emphasis programs matter? Again, I think perhaps the most important reason is the fact that the agency has analyzed this data and has determined that these are hazards that are particularly significant, again, in a region, in an industry, et cetera. And so our view is if the agency is taking the time to develop an emphasis program, that generally means that the industries that fall under the reach of that program would be wise to take notice of that and pay particular attention to those issues. From a practical standpoint as well, what I always emphasize to folks is, as I said, we looked at some of the data, right? OSHA comes out when there is a fatality or when self-reported amputation or hospitalization. An emphasis program selection is often based off of simply remember your NAICS code or your industrial classification. And that is one of the ways that the emphasis program is set up based on employers who are within these covered industries. And so as part of an emphasis program, each area office will generate a random list or randomly generate covered employers, and then go down that list conducting inspections of the employers that are on that list. And so what that means is that you may be selected for an inspection, even if you haven't had a serious incident, even if you haven't had a complaint, or anything, even if you've never even had a recorded injury or illness in the past year, you may still be subject to an inspection simply based off the random list. Some other factors to consider, right? OSHA, approximately 70% of inspections result in at least one or more citations. In addition, if an employee makes a complaint about one of the hazards that is covered by the emphasis program, the agency is supposed to then go out and conduct an inspection based on the program. Alternatively, the compliance officer may come out for another reason. Say somebody complained about a different hazard, they're out at your facility and they determine that your facility is covered by an emphasis program. So they can then expand the scope of the original scope of the inspection that brought them there to then cover all aspects of, in this case, your grain handling operations pursuant to the emphasis program. I've worked on many an inspection where here in Illinois, there's a forklift emphasis program. So there's a complaint about a forklift. Then compliance officer comes out, begins inspecting the forklift complaint, and then determines that that employer is covered by one or more other emphasis programs, then expands into noise. If it's a manufacturing company, they expand into amputations, et cetera. So suddenly what was initially a narrow inspection becomes one that is much broader and looking at various aspects of your organization. So I mentioned this on the last slide or so. Again, as part of these emphasis programs, each area office generates a randomly generated list based on NAICS code. They will delete certain employers. They can also add employers based on familiarity with local industry, and again can expand inspections that are open for other reasons into the emphasis program, whether it's this emphasis program or any other number of other ones. As I mentioned, there are different types of emphasis programs. There are national, regional, and local emphasis programs. The national ones, some of you may be familiar with a number of them. The most recent two, the Falls National Emphasis Program, which was launched last year in 2023. The year before that, the Heat Illness National Emphasis Program. And then there are a number of others that have been around for quite a while. Amputations in particular, combustible dust National Emphasis Program. Then there are emphasis programs that focus on various chemicals, primary metals. So these are all apply across the United States to all employers that are in Fed OSHA jurisdictions, and Missouri is one of the Fed OSHA states, as I'm sure most of you know. So then local emphasis programs, a little bit more narrow in focus, right? Sometimes there are, as in this case with our grain handling emphasis program, it covers the entire Kansas City region. In Illinois, there's a local emphasis program that covers grain. So as I said before, prior to the rollout of this regional emphasis program, Kansas and Nebraska had their own local emphasis programs, and then the decision was made to expand it to cover Missouri. So OSHA rescinded the Kansas and Nebraska emphasis programs and initiated this regional emphasis program that will cover all of the states within the Kansas City region. And you can see here that would include Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska. Now Iowa, if anybody has operations in Iowa, Iowa is a state plan. And state plans are supposed to adopt these emphasis programs. I don't know yet if Iowa OSHA has done that, however. If you are curious about the emphasis programs that apply or might apply to your operations beyond the grain handling emphasis program, you can go to OSHA's website. There's a ton of really good information just generally on OSHA's website. I always recommend to employers to go there and find a lot of good stuff. If you go to, as you can see here at osha.gov/enforcement/directives.lep, it is the emphasis programs are broken out by region, and you can click on your region. So this slide shows the region 5, which is the Chicago region. The Kansas City region used to be referred to as region 7, and then there is essentially a directive for each emphasis program on the website that you can click on the link, download the file, and that directive spells out who's covered, and then it basically walks through how those inspections will take place, what hazards or areas the emphasis program will focus on. So in the Kansas City region, there are a number of other emphasis programs. I've highlighted the ones we're talking obviously about the grain handling emphasis program. There's also a FGAN fertilizer grade ammonium nitrate and agriculture anhydrous ammonia facilities emphasis program as well. And then you can see there are a host of others. So if you have friends or family that are in meat processing or work at facilities with forklifts, there are a number of other regional and local emphasis programs in the Kansas City region. Again, we're going to be talking about grain handling today. So that I think kind of sets the stage. I'm going to come back and take a deeper dive into a number of these issues, but I will hand it off to Elizabeth Morales, the Kansas City Area Office Compliance Assistant Specialist, to introduce herself and go through her slides. And Elizabeth, I will advance them for you, so just let me know when you want to proceed.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the Missouri Agribusiness Association and NGFA for preparing this important training section for its members. Special thanks to Mr. Aaron Gelb and Mr. McClure, also to my co-worker Brian Wood, who helped us to coordinate this important meeting. So my name is Elizabeth Morales. I'm one of the compliance assistant specialists in Missouri. We have 3 compliance assistants, and you're gonna learn in this meeting what we do, okay? So, but first, let's talk about our OSHA's vision. When we do this type of meetings, we want the employers to keep focusing on having the most important value in your safety and health program, which is a safety as a core value. What do we want with that? We want all the workplaces in the United States and territories to have a safety and health program where safety is the core value. So we're gonna do everything and even more to keep our workers safe and our employers safe as well. Safety, as you know, is a fundamental right for every worker in United States and territories, and it must be a very essential ingredient to any robust and reliable safety and health program. So we want this to be spread out to the company and from the top leaders and managers, administrators, to the guy that just got hired just yesterday or today. So we want everybody to breathe and talk about safety and make questions and keep learning, because the learning process needs to be there at all times. Can we go to the next one, please? Thank you. And also we want equity to be part and a special ingredient too in your safety and health management system. And we're gonna include this in everything that we do. We wanna make sure that all the protections that are on the OSHA Act are applicable to all our workers, because we want them to be with us for years to come. We want them to work for us 20, 30, 40 years if they want to do that. And we also want to ensure our workers are safe, are healthy, and feeling safe at work. So one of the ways that we can achieve that is having open door policies where our workers can come and talk to you instead of calling OSHA, which is their right, which is fine with that. You know, why if we allow them to call us first? That would be fantastic. Next one. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about our regional emphasis program for grain handling facilities. The big news is that this was effective in October 1st of 2024. And the new thing is including the state of Missouri. And this is why we are doing today the outreach for you guys. And it started in October 1st, and it's gonna end in January 1st of 2025, formally speaking. We're gonna do outreach after that, day 2. But what we wanna reach out all our members is during this time intensively. So if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. The enforcement, important date to keep in mind in Missouri is going to start on January 1st of 2025. Remember that in Nebraska and Kansas, the enforcement activity started already in October 1st. Okay, because this existed before, but now when it was reviewed, they included Missouri, like Mr. Gelb said. Next one. What is the compliance assistant specialist? The compliance assistant specialist is that safety and health professional that is going to help employers and workers and the public to learn more about OSHA. And specifically when it comes to employers, we're going to help you to comply with OSHA standards or any other consensus standard that probably is out there. We're going to help you to understand your responsibilities and the responsibilities of the workers under the OSHA Act. We are always available for activities that includes, but not limited to, seminars, workshops, webinars, speaking events, or any special meetings that you may have and you want to have us in your meeting, just send us an invitation. We will be there to support you. And the intention is to raise awareness of OSHA initiatives. We have a lot of initiatives throughout the year. So those are free initiatives, national initiatives that you as an employer can participate and can engage your workers during those weeks. And also, we would like to help you to implement any applicable OSHA's cooperative programs. We have a couple cooperative programs like alliances, we have partnerships at the federal level, but also we have, in the state, we have what we call the CHART programs. Next. In Missouri, these are your compliance assistant specialists. The first one is me, Elizabeth, and that's my information. And also remember that we have Mary Ann here, that she is in the St. Louis area office. She's available as well to answer any question, to support any of your activities that you have related to not only grain, it could be a fall, during the fall stand down, it could be trenching, it could be whatever is safety conference that you may have. You can also contact her, and also you can contact our regional cast, which is Mr. Brian Wood. He is also available, and he works a lot, extensively, I should say, with the unions in regions, in our region, in Kansas City region. Next one. And we always want to promote on-site safety consultation program. This program was developed to help specifically small and medium-sized employers. This has no cost for you, is separate from enforcement activities, and is confidential. So when you call them, you ask for a safety and health evaluation of your job site, and you're gonna know who is coming, when is coming, and what is the scope of the visit. And during that visit, you and that person, which is a safety professional, are going to identify workplace hazards. It is going to provide you advice on how to comply with the OSHA standards, and it's going to help employers also to enhance their existing safety and health program, or even help you through the step of developing one for your facility. And in 2023, fiscal year 2023, we were able throughout this program to protect more than 1 million workers that were removed from safety and health hazards in the workplace. And is a beautiful program. And we are encouraging you to give them a call and coordinate an appointment with them. And so it will be a great experience for you as well. Next. Also, we want to remind you, give you a heads up, in 2025, we have the Grain Stand Up national campaign. And we are expecting also Missouri to keep participating. We have Kansas and Nebraska participating already. But also, we would like to see more participation from you guys in this activity. The week has been selected. It's going to be March 24 to the 28th of 2025. We are providing here the QR code if you want more information. But if you want any of the compliance assistance to support any of your events, please give us a call, send us an email so we can coordinate in advance to be with you and support you. We have here one of the members, Mr. Arling Allen, that he called me, I think it was last year, and I was able to support their Grain Stand Up, and it was a great experience. So, and it's one way to listen, well, what are your concerns, and also listen to your successful stories, because also you have done multiple beautiful things at the job site that is giving more protections to your worker. So it's a great opportunity to share, you know, any best work practices that you have developed on site. Next one. And please don't forget to follow us in our social media. Now we are in the social media as well. Everybody is. So please follow us in X, Twitter, and LinkedIn for additional information of the upcoming events in OSHA. Next. And that's our national phone number. And but also you have in the slide where you can contact us or email us at your earliest convenience. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And then I think we go back to Mr. Gelb. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've had clients that have participated, a number of clients that participated in the Stand Up for Grain Safety, as well as the Safe and Sound Week, which I think was earlier this fall. There were a lot of good materials that the agency creates and makes available. There's also on OSHA's website, Elizabeth had mentioned safety and health management systems. If you're anyone who's interested in adopting comprehensive safety and health management systems, there's a whole section on OSHA's website that has materials that you can, templates that you can use. One of our grain handling clients did that, and they worked closely both with the free consultation service to do an audit, and then with the compliance assistance specialist to finalize and get that program ready to roll out. And so I've gotten a lot of good feedback from clients, particularly that utilize the compliance specialists like Elizabeth. I think not to speak for Elizabeth, but I don't think there's no dumb questions that, whether you have, question about machine guarding or respiratory protection or whatever it may be, that's always a good first call. The compliance specialist is not going to run over the enforcement people and send somebody out to your facility.
No, no.
It's a good resource to have. And in my view, the way I look at it is you're best to not only deal with OSHA when something bad happens. If you're a regular caller to the compliance specialists, I think the area office is going to know that you're proactive about safety. So I think it's a positive to work to join these free programs and initiatives. And if anyone has questions kind of about the free consultation service, please feel free to reach out to me too. I can kind of share some other experiences. And of course, there are private grain consultants as well, number that work with NGFA that are focused on this space in particular and have unique expertise with respect to grain handling facilities that can speak your language in terms of they understand the equipment, they understand what a leg is, what an auger is, what the different hazards associated with your facilities, boot pits, et cetera. So I know from working with consultants in general industry, sometimes you get somebody who isn't familiar with the industry and it can be challenging. So there are some really, really knowledgeable folks that focus on grain in particular. So either Jess or I would be happy to share those as well. So back to the emphasis program that again is going online in Missouri, getting ready to begin enforcement in the new year. I think mainly just to emphasize kind of if you haven't been inspected, or at least if you haven't been subject of an emphasis program inspection, they generally work in the same typical cadence or approach, right? OSHA arrives. They will ask to have an opening conference, but unlike an incident inspection where they're going to tell you we're here to inspect patient or this hospitalization, that they will tell you we're here as part of the grain handling emphasis program. One of the first things that they're going to do is verify that you're covered by the emphasis program, based on your NAICS code. I'm going to assume here, since everyone who has joined is is most likely involved in grain handling industry, so you're going to be covered. But I have had situations where OSHA shows up to do an emphasis inspection, and it turned out that the employer was not in the NAICS, one of the NAICS codes that was covered by the emphasis program. So if there's ever a question, that's a good time to hit the pause button. You might need to call the area office to talk to the compliance officer's boss, the assistant area director, the area director. You can reach out to counsel. Check the emphasis program, pull a copy of the directive online to verify that, because you want to obviously make sure you're covered before you consent to the beginning of the inspection. If it turns out that you are indeed covered by the emphasis program, then you'll proceed through a standard open conference where you're going to talk about the scope of the inspection and what aspects of your operation the compliance officer is going to be looking at. It's your opportunity to talk about if there's anything confidential, any proprietary information or areas that you would prefer to limit exposure. You let the compliance officer know that they can note that in their file. Photographs can be marked accordingly to limit them from disclosure pursuant to any potential FOIA requests down the road. Talk about how interviews are going to be done. In this industry, I think it could be, I really would be concerned, frankly, about interviews being done, while somebody is working at heights or supervising the emptying of a truck into the boot pit where they might be distracted. So, you can certainly request that interviews take place up front, in an office area, as opposed to out on the, within your facility where it might be not as safe, where people are going to be distracted. Figure out interviews, you talk about, I'll ask where you're going to go, get your plan, everyone agrees on a plan. And then some point, usually during the opening conference, the compliance officer is going to request 300 logs. Usually they ask for the current year and the prior 3 years, as well as the 300-day annual summary. Anybody has any questions about record keeping? Again, we offer a record keeping training class. We get lots of questions about record keeping. Always happy to discuss those as well, either at the end of this session or at any point in the future. You have 4 hours from the time that the 300 logs and 300-day summaries are requested to provide them to the compliance officer. In a number of cases, they have left before those 4 hours run. So you would need to either email them to their inbox, within the 4-hour time frame, or to talk to them. A lot of times, a lot of compliance officers are very reasonable, and they'll tell you, just send it to me tomorrow, send it to me when you send the other documents. If that is what is offered to you, I would just suggest that you confirm that in writing, not because anybody's trying to sandbag you, but sometimes people forget that they might give you more time, and you just want to have that as a reminder. Some folks will turn them over right there in the opening conference, but again, the requirement under the regulation is that they must be produced within 4 hours of the request. If they are produced, during or right after the opening conference, oftentimes the compliance officer will go through them to see if there is anything noteworthy. Obviously, if they see a number of injuries that are related to a certain hazard, that may then become a focus of the walk around. They will request other documents. There are no other documents that must be produced the same day as the inspection. But sometimes if they're asking for certain programs, your housekeeping, preventative maintenance, your bin entry program, quite often we will show them so they see that we have it. If they want to take a picture of the binder or the cover page, that's certainly fine in my view. But we typically will ask for an email or a letter spelling out the documents that are being requested. So we then can produce those and make sure that copies are made internally before the documents are turned over. Unfortunately, I've had a few cases where clients gave away the only copy of a document that they had when they were handling the inspection themselves. And then the person to whom they gave it, they couldn't find it. So then suddenly we were left with, did this document exist and how could we prove that? But those are the key parts of your operations that will be a focus of a grain handling REP inspection are the ones I just went through. Housekeeping, preventive maintenance, and bin entries. Probably the majority. We've worked on a number of fires and explosions in this industry. Certainly, I think the most common things are entrapments and entanglements during bin entries. So those are the primary areas of focus for the inspections under this emphasis program. You are not, again, required, however, to produce the entire copies of those programs during that first day of the inspection. And then once the opening conference is completed, and you've had that discussion about documents, about interviews, the walk around will commence. And that's where the compliance officer obviously will walk the facility and focus on those key areas. Sometimes they will, as I said, chat up employees. Again, it's you can reach an agreement with them as to, interviews. It's one thing to talk to somebody just to get their name and their position, but if it's going to turn into a full-blown interview, again, I would suggest that you make that happen in an office or someplace where the individual is safe and can better focus on the questions. Some other things. So during the walk around, what might the compliance officer be looking for? Obviously, the upper left-hand corner, those are, again, the primary areas of emphasis in this program: engulfment, entrapment, fire, explosion. But there are also fall hazards, obviously, walking, working surfaces, permit required confined spaces. I know I've worked on a number of inspections at the grain handling facilities where, if people are going up to the top of an elevator, what are the catwalks like? What are the transitions from the ladder to the platform? Are the guardrails all present? I've had inspections where the only way it was discovered that there were missing guardrails or mid rails on the top of something that was 100 plus feet off the ground was through a drone that the compliance officer used to do the inspection, because nobody from management had been up there and none of the employees that had climbed up there had ever reported that there were missing pieces up there. So, keep that in mind. One of the things I encourage folks to do is, make sure your employees understand, and they are expected to report any potential hazardous conditions that they may encounter or see, particularly if there are areas where very few people are accessing. And Elizabeth, you made the point about keep an open door policy, which is absolutely something you should emphasize to your employees. I would also encourage you to I think the way I've heard it put best is meet them where they are, right? So it's great to have an open door policy, but if your employees, some employees don't feel comfortable coming into the office, right? They're used to working in silos and outdoors, and maybe they're not as comfortable coming into the office to talk to management. So go out, walk the facility, talk to people when they're working about safety and health, and maybe ask them specific questions. What's the safest part of your job? What's the part that concerns you the most? And then maybe some of these things will be shared that they might not otherwise have taken the time to come into your office. Some other things, kind of, again, these are all things that compliance officers are looking for during grain emphasis inspections, in addition to the primary areas of emphasis. Are employees wearing PPE, right? They're going to be watching that. And if your employees if there's PPE that is required and they're not wearing it, that's something that's going to be noticed. Do you have agronomy operations? Are there fertilizers, chemicals that are present that will implicate your hazard communication program and training? Machine guarding. So we're not just talking about guarded openings inside the bin or sweep augers, but equipment outside the bins in different areas that may need to be guarded. There are also considerations with noise, certainly electrical safety, right? Are the electrical installations the appropriate type? Are covers in place where necessary? And also certainly your emergency evacuation plans and procedures. Do employees know where to muster in the event of an emergency, depending on the type of emergency? Is your emergency action plan up to date? it will reference the person who is responsible to contact people. But if there's been a change of management, have you updated it? I've worked on lots of inspections in this industry where the compliance officer simply asks the grain operators, where do you go in the event of this type of incident? And if they get a blank stare, that could be a potential citation for some aspect of your emergency evacuation plan or response. So that and after the walk around, again, typically there will be interviews of your hourly non-supervisory employees. I know a number of grain handling facilities, you have kind of site leads or superintendents. One thing to think about is will OSHA consider them to be managers or supervisors, or line employees whose statements cannot bind the company? You have a right to sit in on management interviews. You have a right to counsel present during management interviews. I would say it's kind of 50-50. Some clients, have us participate in those interviews. Others don't. Certainly, I would say when there is a serious incident, 90+% of those inspections, we are sitting in on management interviews. We're advising on different clients do things differently as far as signing statements. Again, happy to kind of talk offline or after the program about some of those strategies. And if you're sitting here kind of, well, okay, this emphasis program sounds like might be kind of a big deal, like, should I really focus on this? I mean, we've got a lot of priorities. I know I think we're wrapping up harvest here in Illinois. I'm not sure where you all are in the process. I think when I spoke to some folks in Western Missouri last week, it sounded like things were getting close to the end. So I know it's been a busy fall, and I think it sounded like it's been a pretty good one. So I hope that was the case for everyone on here. But as you're kind of setting your priorities and thinking about plans for 2025, as Elizabeth said, there's the Stand Up for Grain week. But there are a number of reasons to, I think, to focus on safety in your operations. I'm going to kind of go through each of these just to really emphasize some of the things that we've seen. I mean, number one, I think it kind of speaks for itself. I haven't always included this when I talk to employers, because I think I always used to assume it was a given. And then sometimes I get called out by folks. They're saying, well, you're talking about regulatory liability. What about people? So I always make sure to lead with that, right? I mean, the number one reason why you want to focus on safety in your grain handling operations is that it saves limbs and it saves lives. In the last couple of years, I've worked on multiple amputations. Usually it was a traumatic loss of at least the leg below the knee, foot. We're not talking, a lot of my factory clients have fingertip amputations where maybe it's part of a nail, or usually not even. But when folks get entrapped in an auger or subfloor auger or sweep auger, they usually suffer a pretty traumatic amputation that is life altering. I worked on fatal engulfments as well. So it's serious issues, right? And so that is, to me, the primary, most important reason to focus on safety in grain handling. And you can see here from this chart, and thank you to Jess for the 2023 data. As you can see, so the blue bar portion of the bar deals with the fatal accidents. It goes up and down, right? As high as 31 back in 2010, as low as 8 in 2012. But that's still 8 too many. And then you can see on top of that the number of non-fatal. So we'll be talking about where somebody is rescued or suffers an amputation but does not lose their life. Some stats, and these are pulled from the Kansas City, the new regional emphasis program. So you can see over the last 3 years, 13 amputations, 3 fatalities, and 36 hospitalizations involving employees at grain handling facilities across the 3 federal states within the Kansas City region, so Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. See, at least in this region, there have been a number of fires and explosions, including 2023 in the Nebraska facility, explosion in Missouri, four explosions in Nebraska in 2021 in Missouri, and then engulfments in Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri. So, you know, this probably slide more than any other illustrates why OSHA has expanded this emphasis program to cover all the states in the region. So number 2, emphasis programs equal more comprehensive inspections. I kind of went through how these emphasis programs are going to go. I do a lot of work in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Illinois on for food manufacturing, where there is also a local emphasis program. And that emphasis program, like the grain handling emphasis programs, results in significant number of citations and fines. And so you can see that in terms of grain handling and inspections, significant number of violations have been issued across the years, number of willful and repeat violations, right? And so if you're not up to the latest penalty levels, a serious citation could be cited as much as $16,131 per serious violation. Willfuls and repeats, however, can be cited as high as $161,323. And I've worked on cases where in the grain handling industry, there were multiple repeat citations or multiple willful citations. And one of the reasons I think that is when you have an entry, particularly when you have an entry that goes wrong, if the superintendent is involved in some way, shape, or form with the entry, either participating in or directing it in person, that will typically, in most cases, result in willful citations, because it's very different than somebody in a factory who maybe doesn't lock out a piece of equipment, reaches into it, but there's no supervisor around. So if you have a superintendent who's not following the rules and he or she is participating in that entry with employees who are exposed, that will typically result in a willful citation, which again can be quite costly. The third reason that I've just alluded to, the fines, they go up every year. I just listed the numbers, so you can see historically prior to 2016, these fine levels were set and remained that way for many years. So the maximum fine for a willful or repeat was 70, and the max for a serious or other than serious was 7. And then Congress authorized OSHA to kind of catch up, if you will, and we saw a big jump in 2016. And now they increase every year, and it is essentially tied to the cost of living, to inflation. So back in 2023, it was a pretty significant increase of almost 8%. Fortunately, with inflation easing, that number was not as significant of an increase this year. But the fines will go up again in January of 2025. So I would expect certainly if it's around 3%, we're going to be inching closer to 17,000 and for serious violations, and 107, getting close to 170 for willful and repeats. With respect to repeat citations, so if you have been cited, particularly under 1910-272, the grain handling standard, in the last 5 years, you are at risk then of a repeat citation if the agency comes back and finds that substantially same identical hazard is present at any of your facilities in OSHA. If you have sites in Kansas or Nebraska or other sites in Missouri, the way the agency cites repeats is they treat all your facilities as part of one single entity. If they're in OSHA states, they look back as far as 5 years. It used to be 3. A number of years ago, it got moved back to 5 years. So anything dating back to around 20, we're going to be coming up right around 2020. from starting next year to look back that 5-year period. And then because there is this proactive approach of doing inspections pursuant to emphasis programs, doing follow-up inspections, if you're in the grain handling industry and you've been cited in the last 5 years, there's either they come back to do a follow-up inspection, or there's a chance that you'll be selected as part of the emphasis program inspection. And as you can see, with these enforcement policies in place over the last 20 plus years, the percentage of citations issued as a repeat is more than doubled from 2.4% in 2002 to just under 6% in 2023. Significantly also, OSHA set a record as far as we can tell last year with the most willful citations issued in its history. That is something that I certainly expect to see probably numbers in that similar area for fiscal year 2024. What happens next year remains to be seen, as Jess said. There will be changes for certain. We're still waiting to see who is going to be appointed or named as Secretary of Labor. There's some familiar names floating around, including a gentleman who was originally nominated back in 2017, who was withdrawn, and another gentleman who was I think the deputy secretary. We haven't heard any chatter or any buzz about who might take the reins at OSHA. Typically, that's not something that gets announced until at some point in the first year of the next term. I think during the first Trump administration, there was no deputy assistant secretary for OSHA at any point. There's someone who was named, but they were never confirmed. So the agency went the entire 4 years without a leader. I don't think that's going to happen this time. But again, we don't know who that will be. And it may not be that someone takes over the agency until the end of 2025 or late in 2025, which would mean the folks that are the career people who are running it now will still largely be running it. So I expect a lot of these enforcement policies to remain in place. You can see with the higher fines come or higher individual citation fines come larger citation packages. Last 2 years were the highest number of cases over 100,000, over almost 400 last year. And you can see the chart kind of breaks down how many then are between 250 and 1 million, and how many are over 1 million. I think some of that is due to the enforcement policies, but again, I think a lot of it is we saw the fines, individual fines really tick up starting in 2017 after the congressionally authorized catch-up was done. 2020, obviously, we know why that number was down so significantly. OSHA was hardly doing any inspections, certainly hardly any in-person inspections during as the height of COVID, which I think directly leads to fewer significant value cases. A number of other things to consider. One of the enforcement policies that changed, I think it was early last year, was OSHA's use of instance by instance citations. Now, there's always been, the agency has had for, I think, close to 30 years, the ability to do that, but historically it was limited to what are called egregious enforcement cases, which would be cases where there's a willful violation plus some aggravating factor. And the policy, the change in policy that went into effect in 2023 was it dropped that willful plus requirement, and the agency can now issue instance by instance citations even when the violation is simply serious. So it doesn't even have to be willful plus an aggravating factor. It could simply be a serious violation. There still need to be some criteria that would be met before the agency can do that. But these citations are typically issued with respect to training violations and PPE violations. The language in the standard being cited would have to say something like each or every. So if, just as an example, is on the screen, there's most standards impose a general or require a general course of action. So 1910-134D says that employer, you must evaluate your workplace for respiratory hazards and identify and make respirator decisions accordingly if you have those hazards in place. But then 134A2 says that you must provide a respirator to each employee. So OSHA can only issue one citation if you were fit to fail to do an assessment and identify the types of hazards or the types of respirators would be appropriate. But if you've done that, or even if you haven't, and it turns out that, you know, a certain type of respirator is required for 20 employees and you haven't provided it to any, then you could receive 20 citations, one for each employee who has not provided it. We also see that with training. I've been pulled into a number of significant cases where each employee who is not trained as authorized for lockout tagout is the subject of a separate citation. And those were egregious cases where it was $160,000 per employee who was not trained. And so one case it was 8 employees, the other it was 9. So 8 or 9 times $161,000 is a lot of money. We worked on a case year and a half or so ago of an Illinois grain handler where there was a willful citations, fall hazards or unguarded openings, and the Peoria area office cited separate willful violations for each of the 3 sump holes in the bottom of the bin. So that was a case for a number of reasons, I think, why they did that, but that was a novel approach that we had not seen before, the individual citing of each hole in that manner during a bin entry. So under this new enforcement policy, OSHA can issue these serious instance by instance citations if the proposed citations relate to a fatality or catastrophe. And I think the second one is perhaps most significant. If you've received a willful, a repeat, or a failure to abate citation in the last 5 years, where that classification is current, meaning either you accepted it as a settlement or it's in contested litigation. So not a final order, simply that it's still out there in essence. So, you know, that should also lead to significant consideration if you received a willful or repeat citation that you're considering settling. You may want to rethink that and either litigate it or at least try to, you know, if you can retain counsel who's knowledgeable about this area, they might be able to secure a change in the characterization, so you're not at risk of this heightened penalty. You may also be considered for instance by instance if you fail to report a fatality, hospitalization, or amputation. There are a number of considerations when you're determining whether something is reportable. You know, the amputation has to occur within 24 hours of the accident. Admission to the inpatient service only, so not treatment in the ER, would have to be within 24 hours. Sometimes people are hurt, they go home, they become worse, and they're then admitted to the hospital. But if it's more than 24 hours, that wouldn't be reportable. Fatalities, you have obviously a longer period where you would have to report the fatality if the person dies from an accident. But if you learn of a fatality, that must be reported within 8 hours. And sometimes employers will, I think, if they don't get an inspection after an amputation, if somehow maybe they didn't learn of it, you know, because sometimes the employee leaves and you don't know what happened to them. They find out a week later, oh, this individual suffered an amputation. Well, OSHA hasn't come yet. Maybe we shouldn't report it. Number one, I'm always going to tell my clients to comply with the law. But number two, that becomes a riskier proposition because now if you once you do learn of a reportable event, if you don't report it, that could be a trigger for instance by instance citation. So I always advise clients to report if it is reportable, but first make sure it is reportable. I've also seen folks that report things that don't need to be reported. And so it's one of those things where you need to do your due diligence, contact the emergency contact the hospital or healthcare provider, keep a log of all those efforts. You know, if you're going to hospital to get an update on your employee, keep calling every few hours, write down who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, what they told you. A lot of times you're going to encounter somebody who says, "Oh, I can't share that information," but there is an exception to HIPAA privacy laws for the necessary OSHA reporting requirements. So eventually you should reach somebody at the hospital who knows that, and they can at least tell you that person's status so you can determine if you have a reportable event. And then it's also possible that record keeping violations can be cited instance by instance as well if you have particularly deficient logs. So fourth reason why it's important to focus on grain safety. I mentioned this earlier. I had a case a year and a half or so ago where an employer here in Illinois had an engulfment, and then just as that inspection was coming towards a close, they had an entrapment. And so the engulfment inspection was not yet final when they had the entrapment. The individual who was engulfed survived without, as far as we were aware, any permanent injuries, but the individual whose leg was entrapped in the auger did lose their foot. And so what OSHA called us up and said, you know, we believe that there's potentially imminent danger with respect to this organization's bin entry program. And we are considering initiating imminent danger proceedings. And so what is imminent danger? It lays out on this slide. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but essentially it's a hazard that can pose the risk of death or serious harm. And it's reasonably likely that an accident will occur either immediately or, if not immediately, before abatement or corrective measures are put in place. And what happens as took place in our situation was OSHA notified the employer. In this case, they notified me because I was representing the employer, and they ask you to voluntarily correct the issue. If the employer declines or disputes that, then OSHA can come to the facility, post a notice at the entrance stating that they believe that there is an imminent danger, and employees are essentially advised not to cross the threshold. If employees ignore that and proceed and continue to work, then OSHA will consider filing an action in federal court to seek essentially to shut down the facility. If employees do not cross the threshold based on that posted notice, that is protected activity, and so you could not discipline them as a result of that. In our case, the employer retained one of those grain safety experts that I was referring to earlier. They essentially created a new bin entry program, retrained everybody over the course of the weekend, presented that to OSHA on Monday, and I don't know, I think they may have had one day, they were down for one day, but it was a quick process to get things where they needed to be. Maybe it was 2 days, but again, you know, you don't want to be in the position that employer was, which was really not having much of a semblance of a bin entry program, leading OSHA to consider the use of imminent danger proceedings. I'm not aware. I think there was one case where the agency is actually filed in federal court. Typically, most employers will work with the agency to address their concerns, so it doesn't get to that. Another consideration is the severe violator enforcement program. That is where certain citations are issued as a result of an inspection. It could be one willful or repeat associated with fatality, or most SVEP referrals are 2 or more repeats or willful citations associated with a high gravity hazard. And SVEP is essentially kind of, I think, the often referred to as kind of the worst of the worst, or low road employers. You can see this little graphic here on the right. OSHA maintains a spreadsheet that is publicly available on its website that lists all the employers that are considered as severe violators. So there are a lot of negative consequences of being placed into SBEP, including mandatory follow-up inspections of the facility that was the subject of the inspection, inspections at sister facilities across any federal or any location of yours in a federal OSHA state. And if you get additional violations of the standard that led you to be placed into SBEP, then your stay in SBEP continues. It's a three-year referral. And if you come out of those follow-up inspections without any additional violations after the 3 years, you would be removed from the program. You can make it a 2-year removal if you adopt a safety and health management system, which I referenced earlier. In addition to some of those direct consequences, there's a number of others. Being placed in SBEP is generally not good for a company's reputation. Some folks get customers or clients that say, I don't want to deal with you if you're in SBEP. That's concerning. Your insurance rates are often going to go up. I know in this industry, like, union organizing is not as much of an issue, but we've seen it used by unions to organize facilities. We've seen employers struggle to retain and hire people because there are people that do their due diligence and research about companies that they're considering to go to work for. And if they find a press release, which is always going to be issued when someone is placed into SBEP, there are people that simply say, I don't want to work at a company that's considered a severe violator. Maybe their family, their spouse doesn't, their parents don't want them to go work at companies like that. So it can complicate operations. And then last, but certainly not least, you could be criminally prosecuted. There have been, this is just a couple of cases. There was an iron shredder here in Illinois a couple of years ago where the company was indicted criminally. Pretty egregious case in California, a Bumblebee Tuna, where an employee was basically baked to death in a tuna oven. I can't see it on my screen right now, but I have a sticker that I keep on my laptop from when I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office with a client that had a fatality to kind of pitch to the DOJ as to why our client should not be indicted. That is not a meeting that anybody wants to take. And so how do you potentially get prosecuted for criminal violation in the OSH context? It would have to be that there's a fatality and you receive willful citations related to that fatality. And so again, the better your safety programs are, the more that you can show that you enforce them and you audit and look for compliance, the less likely that you would ever receive a willful violation. But just know, that those are the consequences or potential consequences, if things go really wrong, leading to an inspection. So I'm going to talk about some things at the end in a few minutes that are my primary recommendations to avoid that type of outcome. But I think in the meantime, I wanted to just kind of go through again. So some additional key safety considerations in this industry. This is I think statistics from 2023 under in this industry, right? Obviously, I think the most citations are issued under the grain handling standard, which has a number of specific industry standards. But that's not the only standard that you all can be cited under. Obviously, there have been a significant number of permit required confined space citations, powered industrial trucks, if you have those in your operation, as well as a number of other standards, including lockout, tagout, hazard communication, electrical safety, etc. And you can see in 2023, in fiscal year 2023, over $1 million in fines issued under 272. Fall protection was a big one, 500,000. Permit required confined space over 220, lockout tagout over 165. So a total of 2.5 million. And I think there have been a number of other cases which some that I worked on that I don't know. I think will be appearing in the next year's statistics. Within 272, housekeeping, I think that, that's an easier one to cite, right? Because if you have a certain amount of dust, you have a certain amount of dust. Right after that, then you can see it's split into different sections of the bin entry process. So G1, certainly in my experience, the failure to do atmospheric testing. I know that is I see that time and time again in these cases. Here, that in 2023, it was 4 of them were cited as serious, 3 as other than serious. But I think the most significant and most common violations you could see under G1 II for failing to de-energize equipment, locking out before entering the bin. G4 for not having rescue equipment. G2 for not providing or utilizing harnesses. So all various aspects of the bin entry process, right, that have been cited. Fewer for not having an observer. I'm glad to see that the number of citations for walking down grain is lower, but these are all obviously all important aspects of the bin entry process. So I'll end on this slide, and then we can open it up for questions. But as I said, I mean, I've worked on a lot of inspections in this industry, and these are kind of the things that I've I'd say lessons learned, or just the things that I see and say, if I could talk to somebody in this industry before they have an incident, right? Because I'm often we have a number of clients that bring us in and have us work with consultants and do privileged audits. So to keep those audits results privileged and confidential, but more often than not, I'm brought in after a tragic accident. And so these are essentially the things that I would, that's one of the reasons why I was excited to participate in this program. Looking forward to joining the January in-person event as well. And again, I'm happy to talk offline or after the program about any or all of these. So probably at its most basic level, right? Not drafting, reviewing, or updating. And I every word is intentional here. Site specific programs. So your programs should be tailored to your operations. Don't just take some. If you have a friend at another company and they say, "Oh, here's our bin entry program," or "Here's our housekeeping program," just put it in a binder. That's not going to work. It needs to be tailored to your facility, your operations. The program should reflect the realities, out at the facility. If you've done that, but they were created 4 or 5 years ago, pull them out at some point, as soon as possible, certainly before the end of the year, and go over them. Make sure, talk to your employees, talk to your supervisors, make sure that those programs still reflect the reality on the ground. There's nothing worse than sitting in an interview that OSHA is conducting of the safety manager, and he or she can't explain why the program either says something that they're not doing or doesn't talk about something that people are doing. And if your programs, have a last revised on date that's like 2019, 2020, let's have that date reflect 2024 or 2025. That should be a top objective. Then once you've got your programs, procedures in place, up to date, make sure that everybody's trained on them, right? And make sure that training again is specific to your operations, that it's not just, there's people often ask me, well, can I use videos? Like, is that sufficient? I think videos are a great part of a training program. I think I always recommend that there should be a combination of in-person and video. Video is great. I know there's some really good products out there to use for refresher training, to keep things top of mind, to educate people about the basic concepts and principles. But when it comes to locking out equipment, certainly to putting on harnesses and tying ropes. I mean, there's a lot of training that needs to be done in person. Number three, assuming that supervisors and employees are following the rules. It's almost unanimous, I think, amongst my clients. When I talk to senior leadership, owners, general managers of co-ops and other ag companies, they're all really good people who really care about their people. And I've met a lot of them that are surprised when, genuinely surprised when a serious accident happens. They were shocked and surprised that people were not following these life critical safety rules. And I'm not saying you should assume people are not following them, but it's I think particularly important to to not assume that and take steps, and I'll talk about a couple of them in a second, to make sure that they are. Right. And by doing these things, that sends the message to people that this is important, and that you're paying attention. One of the things I like to recommend is if you don't have like adopting kind of different terms, life critical safety rules, cardinal safety rules, whatever the most important safety rules for your organization are, to make sure that you publicize those. And I'll move quickly through the remaining ones, but don't forget that your site leads are often going to be treated as supervisors, which means their actions would bind the organization. If they have the authority to direct work during an entry, to assign roles, to move one person from attendant to entrant or vice versa, there's a good chance they're going to be treated like a supervisor by OSHA, which means that if they violate a policy or procedure, that it could result in those dreaded willful citations. Don't forget to control all the potential sources of hazardous energy. So certainly locking out, whether it's hazardous equipment inside the bin, a conveyor that will cause the bin to empty and potentially lead to an engulfment, or even the mechanisms to fill the bin. I've talked to consultants who have been inside bins, doing an audit when soybeans or corn starts pouring in from the top because somebody didn't divert and lock out the fill tube. So make sure you can point to enforcement of your rules. Make sure your people aren't pencil whipping permits or records or failing to audit them, right? The neglecting to track the weather and plan for conditions, that was something that one of the area directors here in Illinois shared with me. Recognizing that the conditions inside your bins may change depending on the weather. So you may have greater likelihood of grain hung up on the sides, or bridging conditions, or what have you, based on weather. I talked about, I encourage folks to use subject matter experts, grain safety experts. And then last but not least, I noticed I skipped over one, not having a robust, documented, layered auditing program. I cannot recommend that enough. And again, I'm happy to kind of talk offline about what different examples look like. But in essence, if you've got multiple sites within your organization, 10, 15 different sites, and you've got people who are doing entries or handling housekeeping or doing preventive maintenance, pop in from time to time. Somebody's going to be checking levels on the top of a bin 100 feet off the ground, and they're supposed to be wearing fall protection. Pop in when they're doing that. Make sure they are, and document that you've done that. If you know that there's an entry taking place, even if they called in the permit and got approval to do it, from time to time, show up. Make sure that they've actually done the air monitoring. Make sure that the equipment is actually locked out. Make sure the permit is fully filled out, and then make a record of that so you can demonstrate that down the line. So that is I think the last of the mistakes and or suggestions that I have. So I will stop talking if anybody has any questions. Oh, I apologize. I did real quick. I highly recommend that you consider doing comprehensive site audit, review, revise, and update those programs that I mentioned, update your training, give refresher training, adopt an auditing program, and then document all those things. So if you are selected for an inspection under this program, and you do those things, I'm confident you'll have a far better outcome than if you don't.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Aaron, and thanks everyone for continuing to be on here. I was going to say for webinars, I've moderated before. This is a really devout group that stuck around, and you got a lot of great information from Aaron. Also, Elizabeth, thank you very much for being here. And I know some of the other OSHA representatives, the other CASTs that are participating. So I know we have a limited time here, and I do want to just make sure we have the date, January 22nd, Wednesday, January 22nd, I believe is the date that we are planning to have the one day, the 1 day seminar that Aaron was talking about, that it's going to be NGFA, Missouri Agribusiness, and Con Mason will be working together on putting this together for you. And basically this is the, basically the introduction, a lot of what Aaron covered, and we plan to go into a lot more detail on a lot of these issues. We will also have the representatives from OSHA, from the Kansas City, from the regional office and area office, Kansas City and St. Louis. We know that they can, we'll have representatives there as well to go in a little bit more detail. So with that, more details to follow, so keep your eye open for that. We thank everyone for being here. And so I'll just leave it open here with a limited time. If anyone has any questions, comments, if you have anything you wanted to just write in, and I can we can give to Aaron or to Elizabeth.
All questions were answered.
Yeah, I think silence, I know what that means, but also I just want to verify this is being recorded, and so this will be made available to members. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is Steve Taylor with MOAG, and yeah, we'll have this available on our website, or on the MOAG website, and then however we can get it out to people, we'll have it available.
Great, Steve. Thank you very much. Appreciate y'all hosting this. I'm glad we could get it all put together, and definitely look forward. And I know you'll have more information too on the 1 day seminar that we'll work on putting together. Aaron and I are going to actually be talking. I think we have tomorrow. We'll work on putting together the agenda, and we'll get all that information to y'all. And Elizabeth, thank you for being here too. I know there's information that you talked about that's also available on the OSHA webpage as well. That we're happy to get that, and that I know you can distribute to your members too, Steve.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate everybody, the participants. Appreciate you, Jess, and Aaron, Elizabeth, and all the OSHA folks for participating and putting this on, actually. And we'll be looking forward to the January 22nd, putting that together. We'll get more information out, the location and all the details, logistics for that will be coming pretty soon.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for Steve, thanks for hosting, and Aaron, Elizabeth, thanks for presenting, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.